What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, live for your NFL Week 4 Power Rankings. My Power Rankings based on how I feel about your favorite team, how I feel about every NFL team, from the worst team in the NFL, in my opinion, to the best team in the NFL, in my opinion. This is swayed by nobody else's opinion. This is 100% Mitch. This is 100% BLV. And if you want to know how my power rankings work, they are based on my pure thought and assessment of your favorite team. And it's a mix between how I feel about your team at this moment entering NFL Week 4 and how I will feel about them long term and how I envision their season going long term. So join me here live for my NFL power rankings. Let's have a good time and let's rank some teams. Let's go through it quick. I don't want to take too much time. Let's go through it quick and let's have a good time. So let me know where you believe your favorite team should rank. Let's go. Okay. So beginning at the bottom of the rankings, beginning at number 32, we've got the Houston Texans. They lost to the Chicago Bears, a game that I thought they had a chance to win. They allowed a ton of rushing yards to Khalil Herbert, who's replacing David Montgomery for the Bears. And straight up, the Texans are competitive, but they're bad. They're the worst team in the NFL, in my opinion. They don't have a stellar quarterback. They do not have any area of their football team that is upper echelon, elite, nothing to lean on, nothing to go to. Brandon Cooks has been underwhelming lately. The running game has just been okay. The defense has been maybe a bit better than expected, but the quarterback, the coach, there's just nothing there for me to truly be excited about for them to have advantages week to week over other teams. That's why they're the worst. They're not terrible, but they don't really have any great things about their football team. At number 31, the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are the second worst team in the NFL, in my opinion. They get the edge on the Texans because of Pete Carroll's experience. Pete Carroll as a coach, who I respect more than Lovie Smith. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are still very good at football. Rashad Penny and Kenneth Walker are also pretty good at football. Noah Fant can play. So they've got plenty of skill players, which allows them to score plenty of points on a weekly basis against certain teams, especially against bad teams. As we saw against Atlanta, they can hang in there. They can score points. Also with the Seahawks, they have a home field advantage that is stellar and is better than Houston. And yeah, their defense stinks. So there's no doubt they have one of the worst defenses in football. But Geno Smith is playing good football right now, and you've got to give him credit for how he is playing. Gronk spike the like button, guys, if you haven't already. Thanks for joining me here live. Not sure why YouTube continuously is not sending out notifications, but just make sure you guys have Gronk spike that notification bell. At number 30, we have the New York Jets. The Jets, Jets are at number 30. They are not very good. Joe Flacco was pretty bad last week. He's just can't move around the pocket, can't escape pressure. He threw multiple interceptions. The offensive line continues to take hit after hit after hit. Like, man, George Fant goes down now, who was one of their starting tackles. So they now have both starting tackles that were projected for the season to start the season are out. Zach Wilson is returning. So we'll see if Wilson can add a spark to this team. But the question remains, is Zach Wilson good at football? Is Zach Wilson actually an upgrade over Joe Flacco? I don't know. The wide receiving core is pretty good. Elijah Moore, who's been quiet, I expect him to play better with Zach Wilson because I think they have more rapport there. Garrett Wilson has been awesome, and he might be their number one receiver. Tyler Conklin has quietly been a very nice addition, but I'm very much worried about the offensive line protecting the young quarterback. I like the running backs. The running game's fine, but the defense, I mean, they're a roller coaster. They can't seem to get a pass rush. They can't seem to consistently stop the run, and they can't consistently cover anyone. I feel like I rank the Jets at 30 because they are a poorly coached football team, and it's just not good, man. I just don't like how they are coached. At number 29, I've got the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are 2-1, but they are probably the worst 2-1 team in NFL history. They're at least in the conversation. They beat the San Francisco 49ers somehow, some way in a monsoon. versus a young, immature quarterback. They then beat the worst team in football, the Houston Texans, in week number 3. And they looked very much like we thought they would against the Green Bay Packers on Sunday night in week 2. So the Bears are kind of, I guess, better at this point than we thought because they beat the Niners. But that was kind of circumstantial. That was a home game in a very bad weather game against a quarterback that's barely played football over the last 2 years. So that win was circumstantial. The other 2 weeks, it made sense. They beat the Texans. We knew that was going to be an either way game. And the Packers game looked like what they are, which is one of the worst teams in football. Khalil Herbert could actually be a spark to this offense as he's a more explosive runner than David Montgomery. They need to pass the ball more. They need to find out what Justin Fields is, and they just aren't because he's not passing the ball enough. Darnell Mooney, the receiving core, just irrelevant right now. They're protecting their offensive line, but they've got to figure out what Justin Fields is. That's the goal of this season. Defensively, they're okay. They're not bad, but they're not great. They're not good. They're not above average, but they are feisty, and they're coaching too. I'm just not in love with it. I like their defensive coaching, but their offensive coaching is just not good. It's just not good. At number 28, the Washington Commanders. The Commanders dropped about 9 spots on my rankings. I have major questions about Ron Rivera and what he is doing coaching this team. Ron Rivera is supposed to be a defensive coach. He still has Jack Del Rio in there. Both coaches have been absolutely atrocious with not a bad talent pool on the defensive side of the football. This is a talented defense that is completely underwhelming. They are atrocious out there this season. One of the worst, if not the worst defense in football. Carson Wentz has been fine for the most part. He had his worst game against the Eagles, which was to be expected. The Eagles can dominate the line of scrimmage. They've got a solid defense. But I like their weaponry on offense. I don't mind the offensive play caller, but everything else is just tough, man. This team is frustrating. This team is inconsistent. This team is tough to rely on, and ultimately, with that defense they have, they just can't win many games. Even against bad opponents, they're going to struggle. The next team is the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta's at 27 because they quietly have a top half offense in the NFL. Certainly not a top half defense. Their defense is absolutely atrocious. Their defense stinks. Their defense can't stop anybody. They can't stop a nosebleed. Geno Smith was torching them. But offensively, Marcus Mariota continues to play pretty well. As long as he protects the football and continues to make plays with his legs, this team is going to compete. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Cordell Patterson, a unique combination and trio of playmakers there. And the offensive line's playing better than expected. I give credit to Arthur Smith for how he's calling this offense. I think this team actually has a shot to be better, like record-wise, winning-wise. They can win some games and shock some teams for the rest of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if they were closer to 500 than people expect. At number 26, the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are poorly coached. The Cardinals are a one-man show on offense, Kyler Murray. The offensive line and the running game can't seem to get anything going in any matchup they play. Zach Ertz is just a catch and fall down tight end. Marquise Brown has been awesome for them, and he continues to be awesome for them. But their defense is bad. I feel like you could rank the Cardinals higher. It's really a matter of preference, but I'm just so discouraged with the inconsistency of the offense. I'm so discouraged by the talent of the defense overall, which can be exposed against good offenses. I think the Cardinals, you could argue, could be higher, but there's a lot of teams that are about the same, and the Cardinals are in that group. Teams that I think can be feisty, can pull off an upset every once in a while due to Kyler Murray's magic, but they're most of the time going to give disappointing results because they just don't have a lot of talent right now. At number 25, I do think it will help that they get D-Hop back, though. At number 25, the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are at number 25, and I've got the Panthers at number 25 because they won their game against the Saints, so that's big. Their defense is playing spectacular football. Their defense is stopping the run the last couple of weeks. Their defense is rushing the passer the last couple of weeks. Their secondary is underrated. Their coaching staff is still a disaster. I have no faith in Matt Rule. I have no faith in the offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo. I have no faith in him trying to get the football to their top playmakers, DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey. It's a disaster. Baker Mayfield looks like he's never actually practiced with Christian McCaffrey or DJ Moore before. It's atrocious. So they're a good defensive football team. They're a bad offensive football team. I think that's going to lead to inconsistencies. I think that's going to lead to frustration. It's a very similar team to the way they played last year. Just no offensive creativity or spark. At number 24, we've got the Houston Texans. Or not the Houston Texans. The Tennessee Titans. I don't know why I said the Houston Texans. Same division. But the Tennessee Titans are a lot better than the Houston Texans. How about that? I've got the Tennessee Titans because they're still well coached. Mike Vrabel is going to come out. He's going to put together a good game plan that gives them a chance to win. They don't have the talent they've had the last few years. Ryan Tannehill has been shakier than he's been the last couple of years because he doesn't have the number one receiver. He doesn't have A.J. Brown. Derrick Henry got it going last week a little bit better, but it's still, more of volume success than it is efficiency. So they've got to find a way to be more efficient on the ground this year. Treylon Burks seems to be getting it going. Robert Woods has seemed to be, getting a little bit better each and every week. So maybe they have a little spark offensively. I saw a glimmer of hope on that side of the ball this week versus the Raiders early in the game. Defensively, they're starting to get a little bit healthier, which is promising. Once they do get healthier on defense, they can compete week to week with this coaching that they have. But I don't think that they're a playoff team. I think they're still pretty far away from that. But they will be a team that gives a lot of teams a tough time week to week. At number 23, we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are very similar to the Titans. They're well coached. They're a defense-first football team. They're limited at quarterback. I will say the Steelers have better skill position players that can make a difference. Deontay Johnson continues to do his thing. Najee Harris is extremely disappointing this year, a lot like Derrick Henry. Their offensive line is bad, a lot like the Titans. But they are a defensive team that can cause some problems for you, that can cause some turnovers, that can change the course of a game. And they are well coached, and they have coaches that are motivators and will get their players ready to play. So at number 23, I've got the Steelers. I don't expect much from the Steelers this year. I think they'll be around that point all year long on the power rankings. At number 22, we've got the New York Giants, another team that plays a lot like the Titans and a lot like the Steelers. All three of these teams are wanting to get the game to the fourth quarter in a close game. And if they can do that, their job is well done. Now, I will say with the Giants have less talent than the Steelers, and I would argue the Giants also have less talent than the Titans as well. So for what Brian Daboll has done, for what Don Martindale has done, I think that is one of the best offensive coach, defensive coach combinations in the NFL. And if they had a better team, I think they would be a playoff team this year. I think they're going to be flirting with competitive record all year long because of the coaching, because of how they coach this team, and because of how good Saquon is playing right now as an explosive running back. I want to see more Kadarius Toney moving forward because Sterling Shepard went down. They need him desperately. Looks like Kenny Golladay is checked out of the NFL. Daniel Jones continues to play, I would say, inspiring football. He's playing tough. He ran 79 yards on Monday Night Football. He got hit a record number of times for his career. He was pressured a record number of times. He persevered. He gave the team a chance. The offensive line needs to learn how to protect him, but they are opening up holes on the ground. Defensively, they're actually better than you would think. They're feisty. They don't make it easy on you on defense, and they show you a lot of different looks, and that's thanks to Don Martindale. They also have standout players in their interior defensive line, Xavier McKinney at safety, Adoree Jackson at corner. They definitely have standout players, but this is just a team lacking talent, in my opinion, more than anything else. At number 21, we've got the New Orleans Saints. The Saints severely disappointed in their outcome this past week. They are looking like a team that's looking closer to average than potential playoff team and sneak it in. They still have a chance to do that if Jameis can turn his play around, but the biggest thing I noticed from this team is they are missing Sean Payton. They're missing the wizardry of Sean Payton as a play caller. They're missing Sean Payton and how he schemes up getting the football to Alvin Kamara, getting the football to Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas looks slow. Jarvis Landry looks old. This football team is not as good on the offensive line. They're allowing more pressure to their quarterback in their quarterback's face. The defense is still very good, but I think it's taken a slight step back from last year. Their pass rush isn't quite as dominant as it was last year. But I feel like the Saints are still a team that you definitely have to look out for. When they're on your schedule, they're viable for an upset depending on what Jameis Winston you get and what defense you get from this football team. I'm not counting them out yet, but I am very disappointed with what I saw versus Carolina. Too many turnovers, too many mistakes, and a Jameis Winston that's playing bad football right now at number 21. At number 20, I've got my Patriots. Now, this is largely influenced by Mac Jones. Mac Jones, I think if the Patriots had Mac Jones, they would be number 15, number 16. I did like how they played, really on both sides of the ball, despite giving up a lot of points to the Ravens. I thought their defense played better than the box score indicated, and their offense found their way, and they gained over 450 yards against the Ravens. So I feel like the Patriots looked like a team that could have been on the rise entering this next week at a 1-2 record, losing to the Ravens and the Dolphins, two of the top teams in the AFC. I felt like the Patriots were going to be on the rise, but now that Mac Jones is down, that kind of makes me move them back a little bit. So I'm trying to weigh, that's why they're difficult to rank. I'm trying to weigh their potential down the road when Mac comes back, and I don't know how long he's going to be out, with like how they're going to play in these next couple of weeks with Brian Hoyer. I also don't think that Brian Hoyer is going to be a disaster for this team. Am I saying he's going to be great? Am I saying he's going to be Tom Brady? Absolutely not. But I think he can manage the game, and if this defense can put together a couple performances, I feel like they can compete in these next couple of weeks and make things interesting. And the big difference between Hoyer and Mac potentially could be if Hoyer can protect the ball, which is something Mac hasn't done, they can stay in games, because yes, Mac's going to make way more throws and way more plays, and you wouldn't expect Hoyer to make those same plays, but Mac's also turning the ball over a lot. So Hoyer could potentially bring them a veteran presence that could, make these games defensive and interesting down to the wire. So at number 20, I've got New England. At number 19, I've got the Colts. The Colts definitely improved this week. Their offense still leaves something to be desired out there. Their run game isn't what it was last year or the year previous with Jonathan Taylor. They need to find a way to get that going to help Matt Ryan. The offensive line is not nearly as dominant. It's not nearly worth the money that they've invested in it right now. They're going to need to find a way to get Nyheim Hines more involved in the game plan from a week to week and a down to down and a drive to drive basis. They're too inconsistent with that. Michael Pittman came back, looked great. He still looks like an alpha out there. They're going to have to find other guys like Alec Pierce, who made a couple plays in the game, to step up as that number 2, number 3 option in the receiving game. Matt Ryan still doesn't look great. His arm is not quite what it used to be. He does look a little bit timid behind that offensive line. So I think for this team's success moving forward, if they want to be successful moving forward, they need to get that offensive line going. They need to get that offensive line secured and back to what it was. If that doesn't happen, they're not going to make the playoffs. They have no chance of winning this division. Their defense looks legit, back to what it was. They dominated the Chiefs' offense, a good offense, and Darius Leonard hasn't come back yet, which is promising. So they can win games if their offensive line can play better. At number 18, the Detroit Lions. The Lions offense still looks phenomenal. They've dominated every defense they've played. They probably should have beat the Vikings. So they're basically the same team they were last week at number 18, because I still have a lot of faith in their offense. They're only going to get better when Jameson Williams comes back. Their offensive line continues to play stellar. DeAndre Swift out for a bit, but I think Reynolds steps up. Obviously, the man from Hard Knocks, Jamal Williams, steps up. I think that you could potentially see more targets to a guy like TJ Hawkinson and potentially just more passing for the Lions without DeAndre Swift. Defensively, huge loss in Tracy Walker. That's going to absolutely hurt a secondary that was already struggling. Like I said, I think they should shift towards more zone and less man, and they need to get a better performance out of their linebacking core. But I do feel like the Lions are going to be competitive. They're going to be feisty, and they're one of those teams that I think each and every week, because they can score points, they can upset you. So I've got at number 18, the Detroit Lions. At number 17, the Cleveland Browns. I'd have the Browns a bit higher, to be honest with you, if it weren't for the Myles Garrett news. Hopefully Myles Garrett comes back. He's healthy. He's recovered very soon, but I had to dock them a little bit because Myles Garrett's a huge difference maker on that side of the football. Offensively, though, they showed a lot to me against the Steelers. The Steelers' defense is truly not the same unit without TJ Watt. That is absolutely 100% real, but the offensive line is dominant. The offensive line is arguably the best in football. Their running game is the best in football in terms of their running backs. Nick Chubb looks like probably the second best running back in the league behind only Saquon. And Kareem Hunt's really good. David Njoku got really involved, and I love to see it because that guy can play. Amari Cooper had a big game. We know Donovan Peoples-Jones is capable of having a big game. So their weapons showed out on Thursday night, which was really nice to see. And that was because Jacoby Brissett played well. Jacoby Brissett is playing well this year. So that's a huge sign for them, and that's huge if they want to make the playoffs this year. Once Deshaun comes back, that could be big for them. Their defense is not great to me, but it's okay. And it's definitely better, obviously, when they have Clowney and Garrett in that game. So at 17, I've got the Browns. At number 16, I've still got the Raiders. I understand they're 0-3, but man, this team should be 2-1. You know, you watch every game, and they've made so many boneheaded mistakes. Derek Carr has not played his best game. They're throwing, the ball in the end zone off the hands of Darren Waller for interceptions to change the game. There's just so many little things that the Raiders can learn from and be better moving forward. And of course, guys, I'm trying to evaluate the team not only right now, but also moving forward. And I get that they're 0-3, but I feel like this team, the way they've played, 3 one-score losses, 3 games that they were very much in, 3 games that they could have very much won. I mean, it's frustrating. It's frustrating 100%, but I still have faith in the Raiders. I still have faith in McDaniels. I still have faith in this team. They're figuring things out. And one thing to give Raiders fans hope, this is what I will say. Patriots teams, including Josh McDaniels' offenses over, the past decade plus, have usually started slow. So that is something that you can maybe hang your hat on and say, we're going to get better as the year goes on. And we have not even come close to peaking yet. Once this team finds a rhythm offensively, especially, they're going to be dangerous, and they're going to be able to beat a lot of these teams in the NFL. At number 16, they're still trying to figure out the offensive line combinations as well. That's something. Number 15, the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys moved up drastically on my rankings because now that I see this defense put together 3 pretty darn good performances against the BUCS, the Bengals, and then also the Giants, I feel like their defense is definitely a top 10 unit, if not a top 5 unit. And I feel like with Dak, now that we know who the number 3 receiver will be, it's Noah Brown. Now that we know Michael Gallup will be back, now that we see the production from the offensive line, now that we see Tony Pollard getting the ball more, this is coming together. The picture is coming together, and the pieces of the puzzle are starting to shift into place. And that's why the Dallas Cowboys, to me, project as a playoff team moving forward, project as an NFC team to compete for the East, and I feel like they just feel pretty safe right now because the backup quarterback's playing good, their defense is playing good, they'll be in every game because of that, but then when they get Dak back, they'll have that ceiling that they once had. So at number 15, the Cowboys. At number 14, the Chargers, which is easily the hardest team to rank on this entire list. Because the Chargers, their quarterback has a broken rib. Their best pass rusher is hurt. Their best corner has ankle surgery. They're just dealing with so much. Keenan Allen is expected to come back. Rashawn Slater's out for the year. They're dealing with a ton of injuries, guys. So it's really hard to rank this team. I need more proof in the pudding here moving forward, but I still got to have faith in Justin Herbert, who's absolutely one of the best quarterbacks in football. I still got to have faith in these playmakers on defense. I still got to have faith in the process and what I saw in this team before the year started, and what I saw in week 1 and what I saw in week 2, to be quite frank. So it was only real week 3 against Jacksonville last week where it fell apart because of the injuries. But I feel like if this team can just find a way to get a little bit healthier, they don't have to be 100%. They're still a borderline playoff team, if not a playoff team still. So even with those injuries, they should be able to manage at number 14. At number 13, I've got the Denver Broncos. Obviously, a healthy Chargers team is better than the Broncos in my opinion, but the Broncos, they're 2-1 after a really rough start. They lost to Seattle. They could have easily won that game. Ultimately, they could be 3-0, and we might be looking at this team a little bit different. We might actually be looking at the Broncos the way that we are looking at the Dolphins, another team that I'll get to a little bit later on. The Dolphins are the opposite of the Broncos right now in a lot of ways. The Broncos look like an ugly football team. They look like a team that just doesn't have it right now. Russell Wilson doesn't have it. The offense looks very disjointed, lacking chemistry, lacking explosion. But the defense has really carried so far. Bradley Chubb and Randy Gregory have been superb. Pat Surtain has taken another step forward. They don't even have Justin Simmons out there right now, guys, and they're playing phenomenal defense under their new coordinator. Offensively, I still think they're a good running team. They can hang their hat on that and work from there. And Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, that offensive line, they're doing their thing, and it was tough against the Niners, obviously, because they're the second best defense in the league. But the Broncos are, I think, if they can just continue to find ways to get better on offense, this team looks like a playoff team because they're able to survive through their defense. I felt like before the year, if the Broncos were unable to play explosive offense, their defense wouldn't be able to play to this level. So that's where I maybe discounted them a little bit. At number 12, I've got the Bengals, who are actually favored by 4 points on Thursday night against the undefeated Dolphins at home. So that's what Vegas thinks of the Bengals. So I'm probably a little bit lower on the Bengals than Vegas is. But the Bengals, they've obviously had their flaws. Their offensive line's been rough. Joe Burrow holding the ball has been rough. But we've seen through 3 weeks their defense continues to play well, right? Each and every game they've played well. They've given their team an opportunity to win. And as long as that keeps happening and they have that balance, their offense is going to figure it out. Joe Burrow's going to figure it out. They have too much talent. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, who needs to get the ball more. Tyler Boyd had a big game against the Jets. They've got plenty of talent. When the offensive line continues to mesh and Joe Burrow figures out how to play behind that offensive line, I think they're going to be a playoff team. And I think they're going to be potentially even a contender with the injuries that have come to the Chargers, with the lack of trust I have in the Chiefs. There's only really a couple teams in the AFC that you could say are definitively better than them right now. And I feel like if they just knock off the Dolphins on Thursday night, they might rise like 5 to 7 spots on this list. So that's where the Bengals are at right now. At number 11, the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have been, I think the Bengals project better than the Vikings, but the Vikings are 2-1. The Vikings were able to find a way to win in week 1. They were able to find a way to win in week 3. And I think the Vikings are an explosive offensive team who's still trying to figure out how to get the most out of this system. I think Kevin O'Connell's still figuring out what he has in his personnel, from Adam Thielen to KJ Osborne especially. Dalvin Cook went down, but Alexander Mattison looks good. The offensive line's been okay so far. Kirk Cousins has been okay so far. The defense has been not great. They could be better, but you'd also expect them to get better as well, also adjusting to a new system. So this is a team with a new coaching staff that is 2-1, which is a good sign. That's a good thing. So I have the Vikings at number 11. At number 10, this might be surprising, is Jacksonville. I've got the Jacksonville Jags at number 10. They have risen, and they are for real. There is no doubt. There is no reason to doubt the Jacksonville Jags right now in the way they're playing. Now, I will say they are not in the top 8 or whatever because they've been pretty lucky with the schedule spots they've had so far, right? They beat the Chargers after, Herbert getting hurt, all of these injuries happening. That's maybe a little bit of an easier game than it appeared to be before the season, right? They beat Washington, or they lose to Washington, which a game they should have won, to be honest with you. And they look like the better team, which is where I was really pumped about them entering week 2. And they proved me correct, right? And then in week 2, they play the Indianapolis Colts, a team that they shut out 24-0, dominant performance, but a Colts team without Darius Leonard, a Colts team without Michael Pittman, a Colts team missing multiple key pieces, right? So, yeah, they're for real, man. They're a playoff team. They're the best team in their division, but they still have questions about, okay, let's see them play a good team that's actually healthy. That's what I want to see at number 10, okay? And that's going to be this week, the Philadelphia Eagles. At number 9, the San Francisco 49ers. I've still got the 49ers at number 9. I'm not stressing the loss to the Denver Broncos. Did Jimmy look like absolute garbaggio? Absolutely he did. But this is a guy that didn't really have an offseason, didn't really have a training camp, still kind of figuring out what he can do with his arm because his arm was injured for the whole offseason. And he's probably adapting, as is Shanahan and these players, to the new expectations of the offense and the new plays of the offense potentially with Jimmy Garoppolo. Their offensive line, definitely a suspect without Trent Williams. That is a key weakness, but I expect Kyle to elevate that unit moving forward because that's just what he does. He's going to figure out ways to make that less relevant to the games. It's harder to adjust in-game than it is post-game, right, or pre-game. It's much easier to game plan for a bad offensive line than it is to adapt to one throughout a game because you can prepare your team before. Also, it was just a difficult matchup from the Denver Broncos defense versus that offensive line, but I'm not too concerned. Jimmy also missed many opportunities to win that game. He probably won't do it as much as he did in that game moving forward, but we certainly saw the boneheadedness, and that's why they're not higher than this. Their defense is dominant. Their defense is in the conversation for the best in football. It's fast, it's fierce, it's tough, and you can't run on them. You can't really get a consistent time in the pocket, and that's why they're a really tough team to play at number 9. So San Francisco still got faith in them. At number 8, the Los Angeles Rams, who they play this week. I think the Niners obviously match up really well with the Rams, which is different than how I rank the teams, right? I probably will pick the Niners to beat the Rams, but that doesn't necessarily mean the Niners are better. It just means that the Niners are better when they play the Rams. But the Rams, I would take to beat most other teams more often, and it's because of Matthew Stafford. And they've got great coaching. You know, the Niners got great coaching. The Rams got great coaching. But that defense is playing well. You know, not as good as the Niners. But I just got more faith in Stafford. I got more faith in Kupp. I just know that's going to be there each and every game. While you might get good Jimmy, you might get bad Jimmy, every once in a while. And you know the Rams are going to figure out their offensive line and how to make that better. You know they're going to figure out how to make their run game better, which is weaknesses over the first 3 games. And the defense looked good against the Cardinals. I will say that. At number 7, we've got the Green Bay Packers, who remain at number 7 after defeating the BUCS. This is more of like I'm trying to balance that they beat the BUCS, which is one of my top teams, with also like who the BUCS didn't have and like who the Packers didn't have, and like trying to balance out what that means for moving forward. But I was impressed with the Packers, but also like I don't really know what to make of their future as a team. Like I feel like they're a good NFC team. I'm still not quite buying them as like the NFC team. I do think the biggest thing that developed from that game against Tampa Bay was Romeo Doubs as potentially a breakout receiver for them. That could potentially be huge. If he could be that number 1 receiver with the speed and the playmaking ability that this offense needs, that is the biggest development from that Bucs game. Everything else, okay, whatever. Like, the defensive performance is going to be overrated by many because the Bucs just didn't have anybody on offense. The offense, like, yeah, their running backs are great. We know this. Aaron Rodgers is still very good. David Bakhtiari being back will be awesome for them. But the biggest development is that wide receiver position moving forward, and that will dictate their ceiling to me. They're going to be good, but their ceiling is dependent on the receiver position. So that's why I've got them at number 7. Good win, though. At number 6, I've got the Miami Dolphins, Miami is 3-0, obviously undefeated, one of the lone undefeated teams left in the NFL. But, there's obvious buts here. They played a extremely banged up Ravens team in the second half that they were able to come back on in crazy fashion and win that game. Don't necessarily know if that means they're better than the Ravens after the Ravens thoroughly dominated them. And then in week 3, the Bills thoroughly outplayed them 9 times out of 10, as Jeremy is saying in the chat. They should lose that game, and they somehow won that game. So credit for winning the games and credit for being 3-0, but I'm not just going to take your record and make that your ranking, right? So not trying to be a hater, like I didn't expect the Miami Dolphins to be 3-0 right now. I don't think anyone did, even the biggest Tua supporter. But hey, Tua's playing better than I expected. Tyreek Hill has been a phenomenal addition. The offensive line continues to play well. Jalen Waddle's been fantastic, although looking a little hurt right now. Their defense has been a bit inconsistent, but for the most part, pretty darn good. So the Dolphins, they're a really good team. I expect them to be in the playoffs. I still don't put them in that AFC champion conversation just yet. At number 5, I've got the Ravens. The Ravens, like I said, probably should have beat the Dolphins in week 2. Now, they didn't because they had a mess in the secondary. In week 3, they bounced back. Lamar Jackson's playing like the MVP, and that's what really puts them over the top as a top 5 team. When you've got the best player in the NFL, or the player that's playing the best, a peak, of his powers, Lamar Jackson, that makes you a top 5 team. I don't really care, what the rest of the story is, right? And then you look at the rest of the story. Well, Ronnie Stanley's coming back at left tackle, which that's their biggest weakness right now offensively, right? That's their biggest weakness. Their biggest weakness is left tackle. Allowed 3 sacks this past week against New England. If they can get more security at left tackle, that's going to improve their run game. Who J.K. Dobbins came back, it provided some spark to their running back run game. And then Rashad Bateman has really developed into a pretty good number 1 receiver. Not a great one, but a viable one. Mark Andrews is dominant. And then their defense, when they have all their pieces in the secondary, or at least most of them, they're not a good defense. They're probably overrated. They can't really rush the passer, but at least they're not actively bad. And they do have playmakers. Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Marcus Williams. These guys turn the football over. They make plays and they change games. So that is something. When they're a really good offensive team. I would argue the Ravens offense has been the best offense in the NFL through 3 weeks. At number 4, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are at number 4 because I like what I saw in the first 2 weeks, but I am also a little discouraged by the last 2 weeks offensively. I didn't think they played particularly well against the Chargers. I didn't think they played particularly well against the Colts. I thought they kind of sucked against the Colts, to be honest with you. But they also made a lot of mistakes against the Colts that are probably not repeatable. You could argue the Chiefs should be like number 5 or number 6. You could also argue they should be number 3. I mean, there's probably arguments both ways. I think we will learn a lot about the Chiefs this week when they play the BUCS. I think that's what I'll say, right? We'll see how their offense responds against the best defense in football. We'll see how their defense plays. If the BUCS actually have some of their weapons, that's going to be a test. And this defense has played really well so far this year. Their pass rush has played really well. Their secondary has played really well. And their run defense has been good. So I feel like the Chiefs, they lost to the Colts because of special teams, because a lot of errors, but their offense and the way they're playing is very discouraging to this point. So I feel like at number 4 is pretty fair for the Chiefs. It's somewhere in the middle. At number 3, I've got the BUCS. The BUCS are just really hard to rank. I'd probably put them at 2, but I put them in 3 because of the injuries. I expect them to get Julio back this week. I expect them to get Mike Evans off suspension, so that makes them number 3 once again. I think they probably beat the Packers if they just have Mike Evans on the field. Like, forget about Godwin, forget about Julio, forget about Donovan Smith, forget about Akeem Hicks. If they just have Mike Evans on the field, they probably beat the Packers, and we're talking a little bit differently as they're 3-0. A lot of people were actually predicting the BUCS to go like 1-3 or 2-2 in the first 4 weeks. So Even if they go 2-2, their schedule, it gets a little bit easier down the stretch. They're going to get healthier down the stretch. They're probably not going to lose more than 4 or 5 games this year. So I've got the Bucs at number 3. I would have them at 2, but their injuries make them number 3. And at number 2, I've got the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 3-0. The Philadelphia Eagles have looked dominant in every game. The Lions game looked closer than it was. In week 2, they dominated a good football team, who's my number 11 in the Minnesota Vikings, on Monday night in a primetime spot, proving that they can play on primetime and play well. In week 3, they coasted to a huge win against the Commanders, and they dominated. Their defense is really the reason I have confidence in putting them at number 2, because their defense has dominated 2 weeks in a row, and it's playing much better as a pass rush unit. It's playing much better as a run defense. And their secondary is locking things down, and they're playing more aggressive defensively. We know what their offense can do. We know how they can run the ball. We know how they can get the ball to A.J. Brown and all that stuff. But the Eagles, the way their defense is playing, is why I continue to put them higher and higher on my rankings. Jalen Hurts is not the MVP. Lamar Jackson is, but he's playing amazing too. And my number 1 is still the Bills. Look, they're 2-1. Yes, they lost a game. Everybody's going to lose a game, guys, this season. It's just going to be the fact of the matter. I know that 2-on doesn't expect them to lose a game for the rest of the year, but the Bills are going to lose a game. We knew this, right? Nobody's the 2007 Patriots going 16-0 in the regular season, okay? Even if Ultra thinks the Bills were going to go 21-0 or whatever, they weren't going to do it, okay? I've got the Bills at 1 because, yes, they've got injuries on defense, but their offense is spectacular. They're very tough to stop. Josh Allen's probably the best player in the NFL right now. Their receiving core is really good, really deep, and effective. Their scheme is really good on both sides of the ball. I expect them to get a bit healthier in the secondary. Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White. Their interior defensive line was also beat up against the Dolphins. Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips. They'll get these players back. They'll play better. And their defense, despite that, showed some depth, showed some ability to play better against the Dolphins. And they really dominated a game against the Dolphins that they shouldn't have lost. So I'm not discouraged by that loss. It just happens in the NFL. Teams lose games. So at number 1, I've got the Buffalo Bills. Okay. There you have it, guys. Those are my power rankings for the week number 4 of the 2022 NFL season. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to Gronk Spike the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, please, guys, Gronk Spike the notification bell. The notifications have been a little bit iffy currently, but please Gronk Spike the notification bell so that you are notified with all videos, all live streams. Make sure to Gronk Spike the notification bell. All right, guys, see you soon. Peace.